WSU Extension. I'm here with commercial beekeeper Richard Homer from Homer's Honey, and we are going to do a fall hive check and prep for winter today. So if you're in our beginning beekeeping class, we're going to go through all the things you should be thinking about this time of year and into the winter. So without further ado, should we pop in?
Yep.
Okay.
So just talk real briefly about anytime after the end of August is when you need to start. The earlier you can in September, the better to treat for mites. It's during the month of September and into a little bit into October here, where they're raising their winter bees, the ones that will last 180 days through the winter time. So it's really important to get that mite count down as quickly as you can, as soon as your honey harvest is off. And if you're checking them, there's nothing wrong with it. You should be checking around the end of August, 1st of August, middle of August, kind of see how they're progressing. It's amazing how quickly that number will change from July into August. It can climb quite dramatically. So some of the treatments that are available that are out there, there's obviously acylic acid, which I don't like as much for this time of year. It's something I like to use in November and in March, where you can do one treatment and have a pretty good effect with that. It only kills the mites on the bees, and so if they're in a broodless state, you can have a really high impact on the mite count in the hive, because there's nothing in the there's no brood for them to be in, and it works really well. You only have to put it in one time. At this time of year, there's some other ones we're going to talk about here. There's Apivar strips that like this, that hang. You put a little toothpick, or you can even fold this thing out here and then hang it between the frames, and it takes a couple of the strips for every, I think it's 5 frames of bees that are in there. And this uses, the active ingredient in this is amitraz, and so it cannot be used with honey supers on. It can only be used after you've taken your honey off, because it does leave a residual chemical that's a miticide in the hive that you don't want in your honey. This is Apivar. This is also or Apigard, excuse me.
That's a thiamol based.
And this is thiamol. The active ingredient in this is thiamol. This is what we're going to treat today with. It's a gooey mixture that they put, and you spread a little bit on top. You'll see how we do this. We spread it on this little pad and then stick it in the hive. And that's a pretty effective treatment as well. I don't believe this is also, they recommend not being, no supers on while you have this on as well. Because again, it is a foreign chemical you're adding to the hive to treat the bees.
And I think it also taints the taste of your honey, because it does have that thymol's from thyme, and thyme is very strong as far as
very
taste and flavor,
and not a more of savory kind of, not very sweet tasting. So.
Nobody wants thyme honey.
So, anyway, and then Mitaway Quick Strips is another option that's available that uses formic acid. Formic acid is that's the word. It's basically a natural acid that's found in plants. Yep. Organic acid that's found in plants, and it's actually in honey to begin with, because it's in small amounts in the nectar that the bees bring back. So it's one of the things that gives honey its acidic property that they have. So both acylic acid and formic acid are organic acids that can be used. Formic acid is actually approved for organic beekeeping for those that are trying to follow organic practices. It's one of the few things that you can use that fits in that category. I think I covered all the different mite treatments, but you want to be doing those as soon as you can in September. If you haven't, you need to treat now. It's again, the reason for earlier is we want the mites to be down as low as possible, so they're not damaging the bees that are being raised during this period of time. One of the things that I'll just talk briefly about, we don't have any alcohol. We're having a hard time finding alcohol.
A very hard time finding alcohol. So powdered sugar roll it is.
So you can do powdered sugar rolls now, but you got to be much more pay much more attention to making sure you shake them really hard when you're getting to get the mites off. You got to shake it so hard you're thinking you're hurting the bees,
Right.
and even though you're not. But that'll get the mites to dislodge, so you can get a good count. And you got to make sure you're taking, in both cases, the bees from a frame of brood, not honey. You can't just pull it out of the top of the hive. You got to get down to where the brood is and pull those out so that you're getting the nurse bees, and that's where the mites are going to be hanging out, is on those bees. So alcohol wash is the most effective. It gives you the most accurate count. Typically, even though you did some testing and found...
We did some testing and found that it was, I mean, I think you can get a fairly accurate count with both if done properly.
If done properly. And that's the problem with new beekeepers. They tend to be a little timid with the sugar shake.
Well, and it makes the bees angry. And you're like, okay, I'm done. No, you have to keep shaking and you have to keep doing it.
So anyway, those are the test methods that you want. Here's the powdered sugar jar that you're putting in a half a cup in both cases, a half a cup of bees, which is 300 bees, and you do measure them. You're going to shake the bees off into a basin or something, and then you can scoop them up and get a pretty good count as far as volume, and that'll be about as close as you can to counting them. And then put it in. This has a 1/8" mesh. Window screen does not work. It's not big enough. It has to be the 1/8" squares so that the mites will fall out. If you got too tight of a screen, it won't let them out. So
we don't want the bees out either, because they'll just be really angry.
And bigger will make the bees come out. So anyway, those are the kind of the test methods you want to be doing, and then some of the treatments that are available. So this is the Mite Away Quick Strips.
And we did show you guys a mite test in our last summer hive check video. So if you have questions on how to do that, go back and look at that, or you can also look at there's a bunch of online videos. If you YouTube sugar roll for
how to do a test.
Yeah, it will show you on YouTube a million different videos, and they're pretty much all the same. So
yeah, this one here, you got to be careful. I've had some confusion with people. There is this foil outside mylar wrapper they have on the outside. When you take that off, there's a paper wrapper around the gel in the middle. You do leave that on. Take this silver stuff off, but you'll leave the other paper wrapper on. I've had people take that off, and it kills their hive. It's the time release. It's what allows the acid to release in a slower option, so that it doesn't kill the bees right off, so it's not too strong all at one time. So anyway.
Hey, so I've got this pulled apart. I'll switch you spots if you want. So you can work from this side.
So she's pulled out the first frame. Again, you always start with the outside of the hive, so that that's where the queen's not going to be very seldom, and so you'll have less chance of hurting her or damaging her or killing her while you're messing around in your hive.
Some of these need to be replaced, so
they just got to
just to make things extra fun, there's a few of these that the tops kind of pop off. So we want to see, this is what we want to see. So
you've got honey. You've got a little bit of pollen here in the middle, and but no brood. The side's all honey, all over. You'll notice, so some of you that have had first year hives, you'll see a whiter comb that's on it. That's because it's first year comb. As the comb gets older and older, it gets darker. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just gets a little darker color. Even the finishing, they must reuse part of it, because they get the same color on everything that they make from that point on.
It's aged, like all good things.
But you can cut the caps off of the even though they've got the pollen here in the center, you can cut the cap off of the rest of this and still extract it, and the pollen will stay put.
But where we're going into winter,
we're going to take these out.
Yeah, I should be concerned. So actually, we're going to take out. So I had some when I harvested. I had some frames that were not capped at all. Like they had just been filled with nectar.
So
and I probably, that's a third box. So I probably could have harvested off of that, but we're going to just pull it. And I actually started a mite treatment with it, so we can't really eat it. But we're just going to pull it and call it good for right now.
Use it for feed next spring.
Use it for feed next spring. It's just going to store over the winter.
So we get into the second box here. Now, one of the things you'll need to see all this burr comb on the top. This is a good time of year to kind of clean that up, because they quit making it.
Yep. We want a nice clean hive. It makes our job in the spring a little easier too.
And if they're up on top, then you can give them a little smoke and they'll run down inside, and you don't kill bees trying to get the wax off. It's a good time to tidy up your hive. Make sure that
everything's in order. Get our house in order before the winter comes, right?
That's right.
You want everything looking good. So how much should this hive weigh going into winters? I get that question a lot.
It should weigh close to 100 pounds.
Okay.
And so we're going to weigh it. We got a scale here. We're going
We do.
to do a weight here in just
Once we get that
Once we
last
get-
frame back in, and
yeah.
before we add our sugar water, right?
Yep. So that's always a question in the. So we got brood here.
And as you move to the center, you should see some brood.
Yeah, so that's what we want to
It's
see.
not a
There's a
bad
little bit of
thing.
brood going on here, and they're still raising. There's some larvae and eggs, so we're still seeing some brood rearing. One thing that I do at this time of year will be to do some supplemental feeding, both in pollen and we've been going around to all of our hives the last couple weeks and putting in a couple pound and a half of pollen and then feeding them syrup, mainly because I want them to keep that brood going. I want to have a good strong winter brood nest. And sometimes, so like this is awesome, beautiful pattern.
Really nice pattern. She's done a good job.
Where the other ones have kind of hatched out and are getting replaced right now. There's some pollen. You can see the orange pollen on some of the
On the
bees.
back side of the little bee's legs.
So they're bringing a little bit in, but they're not bringing as much as they normally would earlier in the year, because it's getting harder and harder for them to find things that are still producing pollen, or nectar in particular is even harder.
And just as a reminder, so pollen is our protein source, and we have to have that for brood raising, right, Richard?
Correct, yeah.
And then the nectar is more of our carbohydrate, sugar source, and that gives them energy, and that's what they need to disconnect
heat.
those wing muscles and make heat through the winter.
Again, beautiful
really nice
pattern. She's still got a lot of bees coming, so this is doing well. I'm kind of looking.
I don't see torn caps. I don't see anything
Yeah,
alarming.
no disease issues that I'm seeing, and no deformed wing virus. So the mites she's kept under control. That's been good.
I love seeing their little back legs just loaded.
Yeah,
Makes me happy.
and that's kind of a thing you can watch bees going in. Watch your hive. If they have pollen on their haunches, then they have brood. If they don't have brood to feed, they won't collect pollen.
It's a great tip.
You can kind of make that assertion without even opening the hive up. But
That's a good thing to do early in the winter, or early in the spring, late winter, when you really don't want to pop into the hive, but you kind of want to clue for what's going on. Just sit out and watch.
again, this is mainly pollen and nectar a little bit. There's some.
We're getting towards
There's
the
a
end
little
here.
bit of liquid nectar, so they're still bringing a little bit in, but it may be, it's not a lot. They're consuming just about everything they bring in nowadays, keeping the brood fed and keeping the hive going. So this looks really good. What we're going to do now is put this back in. We'll do a weigh.
And where everything looks good up here, do we need to go down to the bottom
As
box?
long as we got eggs. Okay, the only thing I would say that we're going to find ourselves a little shy on is weight. There's honey in these outside frames, but there's not much honey in the middle.
So feeding is going to be
Something we'll want to do. What I'd like to see is those center frames having honey crowns across the top and then brood down below. If that top box doesn't have that, then that's a sign that we still need to get a little bit more in there.
And you know, I've been thinking, because it's been so warm, we haven't really cooled off for the fall yet. I'm wondering if the bees just have not triggered that response to crown that honey and push her down.
It kind of depends. Yeah, maybe that. And they had the other box above, and
They
were putting
did.
some stuff up there. And so one of the things I like to do is get this off around the end of August, so that anything that they bring in and store is being stored where they're going to be for the winter time. And we could we've got frames of honey on the outside, so we're good there. If I had empty frames out here or only half frames,
Fill it with
then I
that.
would take some of these out of here and put down in there. We put, swap them.
Yeah, there really is not much in that box. If we lift it, it's very, very light. There's probably 2 or 3 frames that are actually full.
So we're now. You put your thymol on the top or the middle?
I put it in the middle, so
Okay.
we kind of need to pop off this top box. And let's get that in. I like to put it in between, and I like to spread it over 2 parts. So thymol is this gooey treatment. And you can get it where you don't have to pull it up in a syringe. It comes in a little
Pre-made
package,
Just
but
peel
where
them
I have
open.
so many hives, we just do it this way. So let's pop this off. We're gonna go in between. Good. You got me? Good thing Richard's here. He's nice and strong.
If you learn, instead of trying to lift the thing off, all I do is kind of turn it kitty corner on the back of the hive. Then you can just tilt it up. You're not trying to get. It's pretty heavy.
So I'm gonna put 2 cards. So it's 50 milliliters
Total.
and I'm just gonna spread this over 2 cards. This goo. I feel like a cake decorator when I do this. Okay, that's it. It's easy as that. And this is a repeated treatment, so I have to do it every 2 weeks, and I have to do 2 treatments. You cannot stay in the hive. You can't go more than 6 weeks, so we want to make sure that we're on it. I mark it on my calendar. I'm going to come back. I've already done 1 treatment, so this is my second.
At this point, I'm going to talk about this for just a second. This
Yep.
is,
And let me grab a
I
pollen
call it the
hat.
bee beanie. So, in a hive, it's just like in our bodies. If you go out in the wintertime and don't wear a hat, 90% of your body heat leaves through your head. It's the same thing with a hive. Most of the heat of a hive is going to dissipate through the top of the hive. Putting a little insulation on the top makes a huge difference in the ability of the bees to keep it warm inside. They do a pretty good job even if you don't put this on. But this is a little insulated board. It's got a 1-inch urethane insulation that is about an R6 insulation, so it's a pretty good, decent insulation for the size and for the depth. It's not very big, makes it easier to store. And then it's been raised up here. We built this up so that there's a little gap as we put this on, so that we can put these fondant patties on top here in the center. We won't do, so I'll put this on in November when I wrap up the hive. We're going to talk about putting tar paper around the hive. When I wrap it up for the winter, when I'm not going to get into it anymore, usually by 1st of November to mid-November, depends on the year, when the temperatures turn cold on us, that's when we want to do that. But this goes on in place of the inner cover like this, and then there's that gap here where the cluster, you'll find when you open this, you'll see this little cluster. Sometimes if there's a lot of honey, they'll be down low and you won't see it. But as they eat up through the honey here, you'll start to see this little circle of bees. And that's where we want to set that, is right on that,
Right
in the center.
And that just kind of gives them, and like Richard said, I won't put this in until later in the winter.
Right. And so this is really important, having a top entrance in the wintertime to let the moisture in the hive. You don't want a wind tunnel, but it's enough that it'll let that moisture escape the hive so it doesn't condensate and drip down back on them and get them wet. That will kill them as well.
Now, some people use bee blankets, and that's
A bee
little bit
blanket
different
basically does
concept.
exactly the same thing.
Right.
It's just a bigger
Like you could use a medium box.
medium box, and they usually put some kind of a burlap barrier or something, and then on top of that they put a bunch of sawdust, or I've
seen
heard of cotton,
yeah.
coconut, things that will absorb the moisture. I kind of like these just because the moisture escapes, it doesn't stay in the hive.
Right.
But the other ones do work. They do the same thing. They're insulating the top and giving some place for that moisture to go. And usually in the top of that, there's a top entrance up here that lets the moisture go in and out. But I like an entrance here. You'll find during the winter time, as it gets cold, you'll see bees up here even on days when they can't fly, because they've got that nice warm air coming up their back, and
Right.
they
Keep
can
them
kind of
toasty.
hang here. And then if the day gets warm enough at any time that they can go fly, where it gets to 45 degrees, you'll see them using this top and not the bottom, because they have to go down into the cold bottom of the
Right.
hive to
Warm
leave.
air rises, so might as well come up top, girls. All right, so that's the bee meanie.
Okay, so now let's weigh the hive.
Should we weigh the hive? Okay, so I have this little hive scale tool, which is a great tool. It's very easy to use. It was a little bit expensive, I won't lie. So this just goes, let's see, we have a little rock under here because we had some condensation going on.
Put it either in the center.
I'm going to put it right here because it's still raised up. Okay, so then I have this little scale. I'm going to,
Zero down.
no, it's not zeroing. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to lift up.
It says 102.
102.
So it's actually pretty heavy. There must be a lot of honey in the bottom, so there's probably 2 frames here, 2 frames here, and up here as well. But I would still recommend giving this a little bit of syrup, which we were going to do, so that we get a little bit of, continue to feed the brood, and it stimulates her to continue to lay, so that we continue to get that big brood nest that we want to have for the winter.
Okay, so I'm going to pump
The right
some syrup
size
in while we're here. And our ratio in the fall is 2 to 1, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And I found if I get a 5-gallon bucket, it's a 25-pound bag of sugar and about a gallon of water. So it's pretty close to that. Your water has to be super warm. We want it to be completely dissolved. And I've also put honeybee healthy in here just to get them to be attracted to that syrup. And this is why I like the in-hive heaters. So in the winter, when it starts to cool off, not when it's like really, really cold outside, but while they're still taking the syrup, like into November, I can just slide the top over without really opening the full hive, and I can add my sugar water, just like that.
Again, here you want the entrance top up. And then this allows some ventilation of that moisture without creating a wind tunnel. What you're going to find is, in fact, that the trigger for me when to put these on, when to put this winter meaty on, is you come out here one morning and open this up, and there'll be a puddle of water here. What that is the moisture from the bees is coming up, hitting this top lid, and dripping back down onto here. And you'll end up seeing a little in the corner, so you'll see puddles of water. And that'll tell you now's the time when we need to switch to the new method. It's getting cold enough. As far as the winter goes.
Okay.
So
after we've done all this, we would be buttoning up the hive with tar paper, or some people use the insulation board, like the pink insulation board I've seen. There's a lot of different methods. I've seen people stack straw bales around. In my mind, that brings mice, so you've got to kind of be careful. We also need to be putting on an entrance reducer. That just reminded me, entrance reducer is important, very critical at this time of year to prevent robbing and to insulate the hive and keep some of the heat in. If you have mouse problems, a mouse guard would be good. And if you've had problems with robbing, you should have had a robbing screen on already.
an entrance reducer actually will bring the entrance down to a 3/8 inch height, which a mouse will have a hard time getting into. And so even putting the entrance reducer in will accomplish that, as we're seeing here. In a strong hive, you can put the bigger entrance in. What you're going to notice, this actually, I got all my hives reduced down now. As we've gone around, after we pulled the honey off at the end of August, and we got into the first week of September, finishing up that, we were putting entrance reducers on all our hives. You're going to start to see this time of year wasps hanging around your front door trying to get in. This is a pretty strong hive, so they're probably able to defend themselves pretty well. But as it gets colder, they're going to be less. It seems like the wasps fly when it's colder, and so they can start still getting in. But you want to give the bees an entrance that they can defend. So that's why we're putting these in. And then I leave it through the winter time and pull it back out in the spring. Kind of an important tool. So the tar paper, again, this, how do I say this? It makes me feel good because I did something to help wrap up the hive, but it also creates a second wind barrier. So when the wind blows, it's not pulling the heat right out of this, out of your box. And then on the sunny days, because it's black, it'll actually absorb some heat and help gently warm the hive a little bit. So that's something we can do, helps preserve the exterior of the hive.
And there's a length that we would cut that. Do you have the length off the top of your head, Richard? I think I got it close.
80 inches long is usually enough to go all the way around and overlap about 6 inches.
Just like that. we would just overlap it.
And then tack it down. Use a staple gun to kind of tack it. You don't want to cover the entrance, so you're just going down to the bottom of the box. Like that.
Okay, and it's a little warm right now, so we're not actually going to wrap
Leave
it.
it on. Then I take a pair of scissors and I cut down to the corner so that I can fold the top down, and it's a little bit long, so I'll usually end up having, and I'll cut off 6 inches or so it'll lay down over.
You just fold it.
And then I just put the other lid on top of it to hold those pieces down.
And then when you have to pop into your hive, you just fold those flaps back over, and it makes it really easy to get down into the hive.
And remember to cut out an entrance for your top entrance so that they can get in there.
So it's just that easy.
Okay, so we're pretty much done getting doing what we needed to do this time.
Just going to button everything back up. Now what about, I mean, we're having a nice warm kind of prolonged fall. We can have microsurgence, can't we?
Yeah, so and what she's doing, she's a little bit later in the season, but she's done it already once before. So she's been treating for mites before now. But because we get a fall that sometimes takes this nice and warm weather clear up to almost Thanksgiving some years, and then it'll turn cold. But during that time, there's a lot of migration of mites. The hives are kicking the drones out, and they'll go try to find another hive to get in. They are nomadic to begin with, so they don't stay in the hive they're born in. But so they'll move from hive to hive, and those mites will travel with them. And so we've seen, and this year's been a really strong year for mites. I've been hearing reports of people getting, when they're doing this mite count with their alcohol wash, they're getting like 20 and 40 mites out of 300, which is way out of control. And then they've treated, and then they tested after, and we're still getting like 20 mites. It knocked it down, but it was not. It's still not enough. They had to do some more. So you really want to start paying attention to this back in July to and through August. And you may want to do a treatment. We found actually in our hives this last year, in mid-July, we went in and did the blue shop towels, which, naughty word, but they're acylic acid, but it's one of the few things I can put in the summertime. It'll have an impact on the mites. I just put it in, it impacts them for 2 or 3 weeks, so that it kind of knocks that curve down, so that we can get to the end of the season when I can do a really strong treatment and bring it down.
And that's a really important thing. So I was just in a meeting with UDAF talking about varroa mite, and I asked them point blank about the blue shop towel method, because I get so many questions about it, and even though it's not FDA or FDA, USDA approved, all of that kind of stuff, and we're not supposed to teach it, they said that it is fine to use as a knockback method, but it is not a full mite treatment that they would consider approved to really reduce the population, but great for knockback, which you just described, and I really like that. So it's a great one to use then. I actually will use it in November again to knock it down. We'll throw them in as we're sending our hives are going to California where it's warm again. So we want them to make sure that they don't resurge on us while they're there. It's oxalic acid is really best. There's some people that use it a lot. So if you're using it this time of year, you've got to go in and treat every week for 4 weeks, and it's stressful to the bees to treat that acid in there. And so I don't like doing it that often, but so I like another treatment where I can do it. It's over in a week, kind of one and done kind of thing.
And it keeps our schedule intact as far as what we're trying to do with our bees. So it kind of depends on what your goals are. Again, look at all the different methods, pick the ones that you like, make sure you have them in plenty of time. With today's world of COVID, shipping is slower than it used to be. Man Lake used to get stuff out in 2 or 3 days. They're now taking longer. They have not as many people working in their warehouses and stuff, and so you just need to plan on ordering stuff like a month in advance so you have it in plenty of time to be able to put it in. Be thinking about those kind of things before because all of a sudden you run down and the store's out of them.
Right. You call Richard and he doesn't have any more.
we do stock. I haven't been using the thiamol. Well, actually we do. The Salvation Sap has thiamol.
Okay, well that is your winter beekeeping hive check and prep. So if you have questions, as always, you can reach out to both Richard and I. We're happy to answer your questions. Join your local associations, your beekeeping associations. Davis County Beekeeping Association is fantastic. I know you guys have started a mentor program, which I love. So you can get buddied up with a more experienced beekeeper and they can help answer questions. But yeah, so this is kind of where you should be right now. If you are a new beekeeper, this is what you need to be thinking about. So,
and then also you have kind of a blog-ish kind of thing talking about what you should be doing.
We do. We have a monthly calendar, and Richard has a blog as well. So you can look up USU Beekeeping. We have a beekeeping page, and there's a monthly calendar that will walk you through and talk to you about everything that you need to be doing each month in the hive, and it goes through winter as well. There are things that you can be doing to prep for spring. And then Richard has a blog on his site. What's your site, Richard?
Homershoney.com.
Homershoney.com.
And we do have these winter boards there, and then this Honeybee Healthy, actually you can buy it like she's showing here, but there's also a recipe on there where you can make your own,
Right.
and so you know it's
Save a little money.
save a little bit of money, even though this is not a bad method if you just got a couple of hives. So.
Right. Okay, well thank you so much, Richard, for sticking with us through this year in this crazy COVID world and doing all these beekeeping things virtually.
Hopefully we can meet next year.
I hope
together.
so. Thank you guys. Happy beekeeping.
See you later.